A mere fraction of the 796 deaths for Tuam are certified as due to Marasmus. Corless and others have used this vintage medical term as evidence that children were starved to death at the Tuam Children's Home and elsewhere. She has repeated it many times in public, including during this BAFTA award-winning documentary.
It really struck me how some of the death certs said Marasmus. Now Marasmus is starvation.
It's a lie. Barefaced, hateful, and incompetent lie.
Now, I want you to imagine, just for one moment, that we have taken full leave of our senses, and that Mrs. Corless is in reality educated in vintage medical terminology, and is an honest and competent historian, who happens to be correct in her claim that
Marasmus is starvation.
You're sure it means starvation?
Marasmus is starvation.
So it is starvation.
Marasmus is starvation.
With this statement she has left herself no wriggle room, and we can be 100% sure that there is no ambiguity in her allegation. Armed with Mrs. Corless's decree, let us have a look through a sample of death records from the General Register Office. These are the official government records of births, marriages, and deaths, and are the exact same source that Corless, with the aid of an official on the inside of the Register's office, used as the basis for all her allegations of abuse at the Tuam Children's Home.
Here we have evidence that 2 infants were starved to death within days of one another at one of Ireland's largest maternity hospitals, the Rotunda Hospital in Dublin.
Here is evidence that 2 more murders happened at another one of Ireland's largest maternity hospitals, the Coombe Women's Hospital, also in Dublin.
Dublin is Ireland's murder capital, as there are hundreds of starvation deaths on record, like this unfortunate infant who was murdered at the Royal Victoria Eye and Ear Hospital.
Outside of Dublin we can find 2 more infants who were starved to death in Athlone. Both were children of soldiers stationed at Costume Army Barracks. One infant was starved in March 1950 by its mother, while in August of the same year, the other infant was starved to death by, presumably, the medical staff at Athlone District Hospital.
Back to Dublin and 2 more murders. The first was a child of a labourer, the next was a soldier's child. They were starved to death at St. Ultan's Hospital. Temple Street Children's Hospital also starved infants to death. So too did Dr. Stephen's Hospital, along with St. Finbarr's Hospital in Cork, Tralee District Hospital, and the Protestant Adelaide Hospital in Dublin.
Every maternity hospital in Ireland and abroad has records of children who were starved to death. That is, only by Mrs. Corless's reckoning. Clearly, Marasmus is not the medical term for starvation, nor was it ever used as such. Medics tend to use another Latin term for such deaths. Marasmus is a Latin term originally derived from Greek that translates as wasting, not starvation. Marasmus was classified as a wasting disease, which is abundant in the historical medical literature and statistical reports. Inanition is the term most often used when starvation, deliberate or otherwise, is present. However, this is not always the case. Here we have the death certificates of 2 hunger strikers. Note the cause was given as inanition. Neither term is a synonym of starvation. One literally means wasting, the other emptiness. Like many similar historical medical terms, they relate to the appearance of the body before and/or after death. Fasten your seatbelts, for this revelation will come as a big shock, and there are many more shocks to come. Corless and others have used an incompetent interpretation of vintage medical terminology to support their fanciful and false notions of children being deliberately starved to death, for the sole reason that their mothers were not married. One idiotic subheadline in an Irish newspaper even claimed that government and church colluded to get rid of and embarrassment to Catholic Ireland. However, years before the Tuam scandal broke, the Protestants were also falsely accused of starving babies to death at the Bethany home in Dublin. The embarrassment the Irish government, supposedly, wanted to get rid of was illegitimate children. So embarrassed were the Irish authorities that they paid women to kill off these children. Absolute absurd nonsense. The absurdity, due to bias and incompetence, is astounding, even by very low political standards. Note: most of the children in our previous selection of death certificates were born to married parents. Were they also an embarrassment to Ireland? Why were they starved to death? The answer has already been stated: no child was starved to death. The scandal promoters knew that no one would be bothered to look up the records for other hospitals, outside of mother and baby homes, especially when the tools of misdirection and anger could be applied.
The Commission of Investigation into Mother and Baby Homes was set up as a direct result of Catherine Corless's allegations. They spent 7 long years investigating her claims. They trawled through over 1 million pages of evidence and produced a 3,000-page report, and found that not one single child was starved to death at Tuam or elsewhere. In fact, the Commission could not substantiate any of her allegations. Instead of admitting to incompetence and lying, she has spent the time after the publication of the report in angry refutation of the Commission's findings.
Mother is gone 2 months. He's emaciated, which means he's starved.
And the more they starved the child, the more they ensured that the child lived in rags and was kept in the cold, the more money they made.